bo, 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 bo.
So I may have pissed off the wrong people on my trip around rural Japan, and I was told to stay in this little cozy place till morning so that someone can take me back to the airport to go back to the studio. Seeing as I'll be here all night, might as well explore an internet mystery that has eluded many all over the world. The legend of Hachishaku-Sama, or the 8-foot-tall woman. But before that, please like, comment, and subscribe to let the algorithm know that I'm here so that they can send for help. Yeah. And with that being said, let's get started. Hachishaku-sama, or Hasshaku-Sama, translating to the 8-foot-tall woman, is a tall and slender ghost with black hair draping her stature. Her clothes vary depending on the account, but the original describes her to have a long white summer dress and a large rimmed white hat. Her voice is said to be very deep, often mistaken for a man's, which can be altered to match her victims' loved ones. Aside from her height and voice, however, she is most known for her signature bo, 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 which she chants while stalking her targets. Her prey of choice is generally young people. The reason is anyone's guess. They could be tortured and killed, eaten, or generally spirited away. Anyone unfortunate enough to be cursed by her is doomed, and is said not to last longer than a few days. Once she latches onto her victim, she stops at nothing to get what she wants, often manipulating victims into a false sense of security. She's also unnaturally fast and stealthy, almost as if she could teleport, making it hard to get away. The only thing that can temporarily stop her seems to be Buddhist talismans, salt, and Jizo statues. But again, these only slow her down. The original story goes, a 2chan member wrote about his visit to his grandparents' village, where he encountered a woman who was stalking him behind a 6-foot-tall hedge. Hearing about this, the grandparents and some locals arranged for transportation and protection for him, as he was now Hasshaku-sama's target. The boy was sent to a room where he was to stay till morning, not letting anyone else in. That night, however, he woke to his grandfather offering food and company behind the door, but before he could open it, he spots that the talisman and salt lining the door had turned black. He begins to pray to Buddha as Hasshaku-sama taunts him, lasting all night. The next morning, he was taken out of the village before she could get him. As it turns out, Hasshaku-sama was sealed in a shrine surrounded by Jizo statues, one of which was found to be destroyed the day he met the malevolent spirit. Forbidden to return, even to attend his grandfather's funeral years later, he fears that Hasshaku-sama might still be looking for him. As stated earlier, this story is originally posted on the Japanese message board 2chan, or Futaba-chan, from user VFTYJTRN0, is how I think it's said. The site is known for many strange and scary stories, among other weird things that we are not talking about right now. Stories like Kisaragi Station, Hitori Kakurembo, or One Man Hide and Seek, and even the Ningen, which we covered in the last episode, originated from this website, but it's hard to validate their legitimacy given how it's mostly anonymous. It's similar to stories from r/NoSleep, or 4chan's horror boards, where stuff like the backrooms come from. A random user would post their scary stories without confirming whether or not they were real, which adds to the mystery. To add to this, there's a lot of evidence pointing to this story being, well, just a story. Like the fact that this was posted anonymously without any follow-up, from what we could find at least. It's difficult to trace this story to an actual location in Japan, and what most consider the most damning thing is that there's nothing on this story prior to 2008, when it was first posted. Anything after this is mostly fanfiction or inspired pieces of fiction stemming from the original story. I'll be going into this later when I cover reasons why it could be real, but going back to the lack of information, it appears that there isn't any documented yokai or yurei that perfectly matches Hasshaku-sama's description. While yes, there are yokai of tall women, they're mostly depicted as having elongated body parts like Takaona with a long lower half. Note that was Lisa's edit. And the Rokurokobi, whose neck extends far past any regular humans. The thing is, both of them have little to nothing to do with terrorizing children. However, other female yokai like the Kuchisake-onna, which we've also covered, covers this in a similar fashion to the Hasshaku-Sama, but not completely perfectly. Which leads us to the general consensus that this could just be a creepypasta, more aligned to something like Slenderman or Jeff the Killer, whose stories came from an online source unlike the Kuchisake-onna, who might date back to the Edo period. Creepypastas, by definition, is generally a scary story posted online that is subsequently reposted over and over, creating a pasta strand of the story online. The tale of Hasshaku-Sama functions similarly, as most of its lore is built upon the original post through fanfiction and supposed accounts from 2008. This isn't to say that Hasshaku-Sama is definitely fake, but a lot of the evidence points to her being just a scary story that popped up on 2chan to scare people. Now moving on to how it could be real, we can first look into oral traditions. There are many oral traditions all around the world that aren't put into writing or documentation anywhere. In smaller towns and rural areas, there could be a variety of reasons why these stories aren't documented, as they are mostly stories passed on to from elders to children to uphold values, traditions, and cautions. It is also often thought that names have power and that naming a creature or a deity can summon them, which can also explain why there's a hesitation in the documentation on certain creatures, mostly because they might be afraid of accidentally summoning them while taking record of them. If you look at Hasshaku-Sama through this lens, it might explain why there aren't any documented sources on her in the first place, because people are generally afraid to talk about her and to write about her. Another thing that contributes to this involves the timeline of the events. According to the original story, Hasshaku-Sama pops up every 10 years, and the events of the story occur in 1998, 10 years before the original post was made. With this in mind, a lot of things could happen in 10 years. One of which could be oral tradition being lost, or even just regarded as old wives' tales. It is also important to note that, according to the story, she was sealed in a shrine with Jizo statues. These statues are depictions of the guardian deities of travelers and children, who protect children from yokai and other dangers, so it makes sense to use them against a spirit who kidnaps youths. In addition to this, they were placed around the entrances of the area itself so she wouldn't escape into town, endangering others outside. Which could also explain why her story hasn't gone out of this small town specifically, because she was too dangerous to be let out. Lastly, let's go back to the comparison with other yokai. While she doesn't perfectly match any known yokai, she appears to be similar to a yurei, which is generally a ghost in Japanese mythology, but more specifically an onryo, a spirit of vengeance, out to terrorize any unlucky schmuck who caught their eye. They're commonly depicted to be deathly pale with long black hair like Kayako from Ju-on or Sadako from Ringu. They can appear distorted or uncanny, which could explain Hasshaku-sama's height. Though they aren't always female spirits as popularized by the media, as an onryo is just born out of grudge or some sort of vengeance, which ties them down to something like the house in Ju-on or the tape in Ringu. This could explain why Hasshaku-sama is specifically latched onto the village as well, never leaving that area because that is her source of grudge. To add to this, some translations of the original story actually acknowledge her as an onryo. However, due to the lack of information again, it's still hard to say whether or not she is one. Overall, it's hard to deny the fact that Hasshaku-sama has definitely left an impact on the internet landscape as a whole, as she can now be seen in a lot of works, both professional and unprofessional, and even being referenced in the latest Resident Evil game, starring Big Lady Mommy. Again, that's Lisa's edit. Specifically, Lady Dimitrescu, who is a tall, white, female vampire who is around 9 feet tall. It's hard to determine whether the story is real, as there are a lot of damning evidence to indicate that it's just a creepypasta. On the other hand, there's also a lot of ways to interpret the story to explain why she could be real. I personally wouldn't want to find out for myself, as the thought is terrifying, but even I can't deny the modern day mythos, as she is as real to us now as the boogeyman at the very least, following the legacies of other online boogeymen from creepypastas. With that being said, if you made it this far, like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us, do you think she's just a creepypasta, or is there something more sinister behind the story? Let us know.